So yeah, my name's Josh Hoxie. I work at the Institute for Policy Studies, and Lindsay her program just got added to IPS, so we're now colleagues, which is great. I run a website, or help run a website called Inequality.org, which you should all go check out. Check us out on social media. We have a newsletter that I brought a sign up for if anyone hears something they want to learn more about. Check out pretty much all the stats that are listed on the handout that went around. You can find on Inequality.org. So pretty easy to come by. I was asked to talk about inequality in the federal budget, so I figured I'd start with like where are we at with inequality right now. One of my colleagues likes to say that inequality is like adding spice to a dish. A little bit is interesting, and too much and you ruin it. So I should preface this by saying, often I talk to people who are like, oh, you want everything to be equal, everything to be fair, and we're not talking about that. What I'm basically here to say is that inequality is rampant, and everything that the Trump administration wants to do is to make it worse. So that's like, here we are in a nutshell. There's a new study that just came out last week that showed 80 cents of every dollar of new wealth created in the past year went to the top 1%. That to me was pretty staggering. I co-authored a report looking just at the United States wealth inequality with my colleague Chuck Collins. We showed that 3 people, Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, and Bill Gates, own as much wealth as half the country combined. That's gone up. I mean, Jeff Bezos is now the first 100 millionaire in the world, so that's cool for him. He now is a 9-figure man. Meanwhile, 1 in 5 Americans lives with zero wealth or negative wealth, meaning they owe more money than they own. That's the reality for many Americans, having zero wealth. So what we're seeing is at an increasing rate of economic inequality. If any of you have seen even a single Bernie Sanders speech, you've heard this rant before, so I won't go too much more into that. The Trump tax cut, some people are calling it the Trump tax scam, just passed Congress. I called it the biggest money grab in American history, by the wealthy, for the wealthy. What we saw was sort of unprecedented kickbacks to political donors in the Republican Party. So, I work at a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. I'm not here to pick on Republicans. However, what just happened was strictly done on party lines. There was not a Democrat supporting tax cuts for the ultra wealthy, which is what the Trump tax cuts were. The reason the Trump tax cuts are in this conversation with the federal budget is what they just did was create a massive hole in the federal government. And what that means is that we've created or manufactured a crisis where we're going to see the Republicans try to justify massive cuts in domestic spending because we're apparently broke. As the wealthiest country in the world, I'm here to say we're not broke. There's plenty of money. As Lindsay so eloquently pointed out, we're spending an absurd amount on defense, and the rest of it we're giving as tax cuts to the most profitable corporations and wealthiest people in the history of planet Earth. So that's where we're at in terms of the Trump tax cuts. And the reason the Trump tax cuts are particularly important right now, after they just passed, is that going into the passage of the bill, they were the least popular major legislation ever considered in Congress, ever to be passed in the past 30 years. And the reason that's interesting is because we are seeing Republican groups planning to spend tens of billions of dollars over the next 11 months leading up to the 2018 election on selling this bill to make people think that this helped you, that this was a benefit to you and your family. And to the extent that they're successful is to the extent that they'll be able to do this over and over again, which is to say we will see more draconian, more inequality increasing legislation. So I would say now is a good time to tell everyone and anyone that this was exactly what it was, a gift to the wealthy and hurt the rest of us. So that's why I'm on a little bit of a tax cut kick right now, even though we just lost on this issue after a whole bunch of advocacy. I was also asked to talk a little bit about students, and particularly graduate students here at MIT. Are there graduate students in the room? We have 1, 2, okay. So 3, sorry, 3. Graduate students in the Trump tax cuts were specifically called out and targeted in a way that's also somewhat unprecedented. The initial Republican tax bill wanted to treat graduate school stipends as ordinary income, which would have increased grad school tax rates by like 300% in some cases.
Not the stipends, the tuition remission.
Tuition remission, sorry. The fact that you're not paying tuition, so taking what you would have paid in tuition and calling that your income, right? That's new and unpleasant for everyone. It did not make it in the final bill, so graduate students were spared in this bill. Not the least of which is because there was a massive public outcry, and graduate students got organized in a hurry to oppose that. So there's a blueprint there for what happens when this comes up again, and it will come up again, I firmly believe. Also included in the Trump budget that was released earlier in 2017 were programs specifically, again, targeting graduate students, so eliminating the public student loan forgiveness program, which was a program introduced under the previous administration in which basically you can go work for a nonprofit or government agency for 10 years, and after 10 years of timely payments and public service, get your loans forgiven. So that's an incredibly lucrative program, an important program if you're a graduate student or undergraduate with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And they also wanted to cap the amount of borrowing that graduate students can do. So it's interesting that graduate students are on the enemies list of the Republican budget writers right now in Congress. Whether those things become laws sort of remains to be seen. Lindsay touched on the sort of perpetual budget discussion we're in right now. I worked in Capitol Hill. Understanding budget minutia of policy is like boring to everyone. So I'll just cut it down to this. Like regular order no longer exists in the United States Congress. So essentially what we're going to do is wait until programs expire and then argue about whether or not we reauthorize them. So that's what happened with the Children's Health Insurance Program, CHIP, which was hopefully some people saw in the news. Did anyone see the word CHIP in the news over recently? Yeah. CHIP's incredibly important. I mean, it insures 9 million kids, and Republicans essentially said we can't afford it. And it blows my mind that that was the argument. And they, fortunately, they lost. CHIP was reauthorized. So we have CHIP, yay. Other programs that come up for reauthorization have not been so fortunate. So like the Perkins loan, for instance, which is a subsidized student loan program, just went away because it was not reauthorized. Up for reauthorization next year, which is something we should all be paying attention to, is SNAP benefits. So supplemental nutrition program, also known as food stamps. I put in the handout there, tens of millions of people have gotten it over the years. It's incredibly important, and without reauthorization, it will go away. So again, what we're seeing is a targeted draconian effort to directly benefit the most wealthy people in this country at the expense of everyone else. I don't think it's sugar-coated anymore. It used to be. The gloves are off. So now's a good time to start paying very close attention to what's happening in Washington, because even after this big bill just passed, they're only getting started with what comes next. So,
thank you.